Hello and welcome back to the TapD demo series. I'm Hannah with Lightning Labs, and this is a series of short demo videos walking through using the Taproot Assets daemon, TapD, from install to mint to send to burn. And at this point in the series, we've done all the things. We've installed, we've minted, we've transferred, and we've burned assets. But before we go, we'll discuss how to update a TapD node. Now, we demonstrated installing three different ways, right? We demoed how to use Polar to set up a reg test network. We demonstrated installing using litd, and we demonstrated installing using just tapd from source. So we'll discuss how to update, again, in three different ways. So we'll talk briefly about how to update Polar. We'll discuss how to update when you've installed binaries, so how to update your binaries, be that tapd or litd. And then we'll demonstrate how to update when you've installed from source, specifically tapd, but the same process will apply if you've installed using litd. Awesome. So let's start with Polar. So if you've downloaded Polar and you're using that, and now you want to update to the latest version, there are a couple different things you can do. One is just open Polar here and check for new node versions, but you may need to just download a new version of Polar itself, in which case you want to go here to lightningpolar.com, and you can download the latest and greatest for Linux, Mac, or Windows. Keep in mind that you may need to recreate networks that you have set up in Polar with the latest version. Cool. So that's what to do if you are trying to update Polar. Let's talk briefly about how to update if you installed using binaries. And we'll come back to this demo node of mine for a moment here. This is my tapd demo node. It's also the node that I've called Alice on a number of different, number of these videos. And we've used this to mint a number of different assets. And this one is the node that we set up using, installing tapd, the Taproot Assets daemon from source. So we have on this machine, we have Bitcoin-D, LND, and then tapd, and we can have a look at what's running here. Oh, forgot password. Cool. So we have Bitcoin-D running, we have LND running, and we have tapd running. And on this particular machine, we installed all of this from source. So, but let's talk briefly about how we would update if we had installed some of this from the binaries. So if we had installed them from the binaries using our standard process, which we've talked about, regular install, then they would probably, those binaries would likely be located here, user local bin. And if we have a quick look here, we can see that I have some Bitcoin binaries here, as this is the Bitcoin install process. So if we were going to update the binaries, our first step would be to stop the system, stop the service from running. So I have things set up via systemd, so I would stop the systemd service. Then I would remove the old binaries, which would likely be located here. Then I would go and install new binaries using the same process you did the first time around, and processes that we've demonstrated in the speedrun video, for example. And so go install those binaries, do all your appropriate checks and whatever your process is going to be there. Then I would start it back up, start via systemd or however you have it set up, and run some checks and make sure everything's working, right? So you just want to replace those binaries. But a quick note here. Let's go to, this is our home directory that we're in here now. And if you've installed in the standard way, in the way that we've been demonstrating in this series, then likely here in the Ubuntu home directory, you'll have all of these data directories. Here's my data directory for Bitcoin, here's my data directory for LND, and here's my data directory for tapd. And of course, if you're updating, you'd use binaries, you want to update the binaries, but you do not want to touch these data directories unless, of course, you want to wipe out all your data. But likely you don't, so just keep that in mind and leave these alone. All right, cool. So we have discussed how to update if you're using Polar or if you installed from the binaries. And now let's discuss how to update if you've installed from source. Specifically, we're demonstrating updating just tapd by itself, but it would be pretty much the same process if you had used litd to install all this. Okay, so when we're installing from source, we need to, make the Go programs. So we need to be aware of what version of Go we have on our machine. So it's good to check that out before we get started here. On this machine, I currently have 1.21.3, which should be just fine for what we're doing today. But if you run into any installation issues, it's good to check this out. All right, also we'll have a look at what version we are currently running. So right now on this demo node, I have TAPD version 0.3.1. And we're going to update to the latest. But first, let's have a quick look at what's running. I'll use my favorite command here. I just like to see what's going on the machine before I mess with anything. Again, Bitcoin D is running, LND is running, and TAPD is running. Cool. So now what we're going to do is, as gracefully as possible, we're going to stop TAPD. So I'm going to start by running this command, tap CLI stop. Cool. And I'm also going to stop via systemd for good measure here. Awesome. And I'm going to check that indeed that has been properly stopped. Well, inactive. That's what we would expect. All right, and so before we go into the repo and pull down the latest, one thing I like to do is go here and have a look at this, and we can see this is what we compiled here from our Go code, and we have tap CLI and tap D, and I just check out the dates, and then after we update to the latest, I come back and have another look at this, just kind of a sanity check. Okay, so we're here in the home directory, and we can see this is where our Taproot Assets repo is located. So we're going to go in there, and then it's a very simple git pull. Cool. So we got all kinds of new stuff. Have a look at this. Excellent. And I'm going to use this one. So as of recording, the latest and greatest is this one here, this version 0.3.2 release candidate 2. And as we're on a testnet node here, it makes perfect sense for us to update to a release candidate and test it. Of course, if you were working with the production node, you might not want to update to a release candidate. You might want to wait for a proper release. But that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to do, hold on, let me check my notes. Cool, that's where we're at. Git checkout release candidate 2, 0.3.2. Cool, looks good. And then it's just very simple, make install. And this should only take a minute. Okay, that is done installing. So in theory, we're pretty much done here, but I want to go through and do all our checks before we decide that we are done. So first, let's do tap CLI version. Cool, that's the latest version. So that's what we are expecting. Now, as we discussed earlier, let's go here. And we can check the dates on these, and hey, we're at December 1st. So that's the latest and greatest as of recording. Awesome. Cool. So now we will once again start up TAPD using systemd. And we'll give that just a second to get started up, and then we'll check on the status. Active, running, sounds good. And one last check here. Great, this is what we're expecting. TAPD running on these 2 ports. Awesome. So just to recap, we've discussed updating Polar, we've discussed updating binaries, and we've demonstrated updating from source. As always, you can get more information at docs.lightning.engineering. Thanks.